Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you everyone for showing up. And thank you Sirtaj, Satya, Professor Kanan, Gaurav, and Ajit C, right? Yeah. But thanks a lot. I am sure it was a very interesting discussion. And well, that's it. Thank you. Tea is waiting outside for you. And we'll come back for Arul's talk. And in this session, in this hall, we are going to also have I'd like a talk session. So if you would like to present something which is a 5-minute topic, you can do that.
Before I start, I would like to thank Professor Kanan Magdalya and Professor Prabhu Ramachandran from IIT Bombay. Those who gave introduction about Python in 2009. It was in Kongui Engineering College, Tiruvannamalai district and Tamil Nadu. So those people talks inspired me, and then I started Python. So big data. So who are all thinking that they are doing something on big data? Okay. So what could be the size of big data you are using? Approximately in TBs or? Yeah. I am accessing in petabytes. So how I am accessing petabytes of data in Python? So who am I? I will be talking about advantages of Python in atmosphere and oceanic science. I am Arul Allen, currently working as project scientist CE at National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. It is located in Noida. So let's global warming. Everybody talking about global warming. So what's global warming? So 2015 is the warmest year recorded since 2000. It's the fourth time. So you can see that here, the month. This is the monthly anomaly. Difference from average temperature, average sense in terms of climatology. This is how it should be, but the positive color shows in red color and negative shows in blue color. So the most of the area and around the world you can see it is in red color. Yeah, this one. This is the annual. You can see that in annual, you can see the most of the places in red color. The temperature has increased much higher than the what it would have been. So climate change. What is climate change? First of all, what is mean by climate? The common people mistakes that they are talking weather in terms of climate, but actually climate means it will take time to change. It's just not a day-to-day phenomena. It's a year-to-year phenomena. At least 30 years it required to change something in our climate. So it's a slow and steady, long period process, and also it's feedback to the climate system. So this is our general pattern of sea surface temperature. This is how it would be. So as I told that climate could be like 30 years data. So this is observed sea surface temperature around the world. So this, you can see that most of this equatorial place temperature is around more than 30. So when we are changing this climate, this is how it should be, but when we are changing over a time, so this is called climate change. This is the observed SST past 100 years during the Indian Ocean. Yeah, and this is a trend from 1914 to 2013. It's a 100-year period. Trend per decade. So in per decade, you know trend now, how to calculate trend. Y equal to mx plus c, that's m is called trend. So here most of the place you can see it's in the positive colors, which means 0.2 degree per decade. So over the Arabian Sea you can see that about more than 0.16 degrees Celsius changing per decade over the ocean temperatures. And this is the same similarity. This is total linear change. In 100 here, in Bay of Bengal it is increased like 0.8 degrees Celsius, whereas in Arabian Sea it's a 0.9 degrees Celsius. See, increase in temperature over the ocean surface is very abnormal phenomenon. So we increased in the past 100 years this much, about 1 degree Celsius in our Indian Ocean. And this another one is we are more interested in JJS. I mean June, July, August, September. It is called monsoon period in our Indian domain. So when we are during that period in the past 112 years, you can see that in Arabian Sea we have increased this much temperature. So this all affects our monsoon system. So this all affects everything. So once we increase the temperature of ocean, the final causes would be like increasing the sea level. So you can see that in 20th century we have increased from the average, from the mean sea level up to more than 10 centimeter. This is the recent study. So why we are talking about climate? That's a different issue, but when we are talking about climate, how the latest technology handling the climate data. So we have models, many models. Models means equations which generate the past data and previous future data as well as the current data. So yes. So when we are generating the equations and then feeding input in terms of initial condition and boundary condition, and then it will generate forecast for next 100 years, next 1000 years, or the previous something called incast, previous 10 years. So these kind of climate prediction or the past prediction, you can say that you need a lot of computations. So models are developed either in Fortran or in Python itself. So once we produce the data, so each data size will be like very much high. Each data file is you can say some 20 GB, just each data file. Likewise, each model producing plenty of data. So how one can handle these kind of data sets. So when we are come to weather means it's a fast change. Day to day it will change. Within a day, diet will change. Morning to evening it will change. So it's a short process, and this also feedback to the climate. So what is the weather forecasting? So medium range is called 3 to 10 days forecast. This is what we are doing. Like IMD is just forecasting for only next one or 2 days, whereas National Center for Medium Range Weather forecast for next 10 days every day. So every day we are producing like 100 GB. So when 1 year is gone, we are ending up with more than 1 petabytes. So after 1 year has gone, how I'm going to retrieve the past data? Not only past data, I need to collect all the data always. This is what we are doing about it. So NCMRW is located at Noida, and we are running model like various models, GFS, at various resolutions. This is a global model, so every institute from each country producing their own models or borrowing models and then customize it and then running for the whole global, not only for their own domain. Also we are running, collaborating with the UK Met Office Unified Model. It focuses on forecast during mainly monsoon season, not only monsoon season every day, mainly focusing on monsoon season. So how does one track? If you are producing large of files, how could one track? So we developed a framework called Diagnostics to facilitate these problems, and it was funded by Ministry of Earth Science, and we developed the framework in the past 4 years at IIT Delhi and hosted at NCMRWF. So each model has it has grid. If you know NumPy, then you can understand very easily. So NumPy 2D NumPy array, it's like assume like 1000 by 1000 2D array. This is just a latitude longitude. You have to imagine. So not only latitude longitude, you have vertical pressure level also. So we have many vertical pressure levels, and then time axis. So every model is producing 4-dimensional data sets in terms of NumPy array. So we have many models around the world, more than 10, the standard models. So every model is every day producing next 10 days forecast. Just think how huge data sets they are producing. How could one collaborate all the data sets and then compare which one is best or come up with new model sets? And more difficult is like every day we have analysis also. Analysis taken from satellites or from ground-based observation data. But feeding this analysis and then forecasting for next 10 days. Like this is 24-hour and 48-hour up to 7 days. This is what I shown here. But once we are not just every day producing, but we have to validate what we produced yesterday. So yesterday's 24 forecast is validated for 2 days observation, isn't it? So we have to validate all the 7 days or 10 days forecast with the new observation whenever it happens. So when we talk in terms of multi-models, so one institute is running multiple models and multiple days of forecast, how could one handle such a huge data sets as well as apply the statistical over the huge data set? Suppose some small calculation like each model producing n symbols. So n symbols means I'm starting with one initial condition and then running for next 10 days. And then the same day I'll start with another initial condition and then start with another next 10 days. So like this we have multiple ensembles. So when we one day producing one analysis file and next 10 days forecast, and M stands for ensembles. So in one day I'm producing like suppose for only one forecast file, one forecast and one ensembles, one model, one time. So like one analysis and 15 forecasts produced in every day, and with minimum 5 ensembles. Right now we are running some 45 ensembles. So suppose 15 models for 100 years. So we are getting like 4 crores 38,000 files. Each file size would be like more than 1 GB. So I mean you can't just predict directly 10-day forecast. So you have to go linearly. The model will forecast like every 40 minutes and then write into the every 3-hour files. So every 3 hour only, once you have to use this 3 hour to predict the next 3 hour. Like that only you can produce forecast it for next 10 days. So we are getting a huge amount of files. It's a really very big data set. We are producing more than 1 petabytes in a year in just our center. If you are collaborating with other centers, then we have to collaborate all the data sets. And we are raising with some additional issues like model always in development and somehow may not have run long enough to run, and it may not have its own climatology. We just now started, so we have to use some different climatology to analysis. And we have observation product also like rainfall. We have ground-based observations that also we have to match with the forecast. So currently all the diagnosis is in all over the world. People may not maybe using like Grabs, Fortran, CDO, DBNet. These are all open source softwares, though it's written in Fortran. So they don't have much facility to handle this kind of data sets or this kind of problems when it comes to huge data. So they have facing a problem in terms of like how to handle these kind of data sets when it comes with the time associated data. So climate or weather forecasting. There are two different things. One is climate and another one is weather. We are only talking about weather, but people used to talk even in terms of climate. So yeah, another more important thing is file formats. We are producing the model outputs in terms of something called GRIB file or REDCDF file. It's nothing bigger. It's just all about NumPy array. How we are writing NumPy array in a compact format. So each model produces their own format. So we have to handle all the formats. So UVC that is a use it as a library. It's ultra scale visualization climate data analysis tool. Using that, we developed on a framework to solve these kind of problems, like handle multiple models seamlessly, verify the forecast and diagnose the model in a systematic way. So plotting and visualization recall to avoid repetition of work, and we created GUI using Python itself. So this is called ultra scale visualization climate data analysis tool. It's a Python based library which is coupled with many visualization toolkit like VTK, ParaView, VCS, DVD3, VCT, and R. It was developed at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Canada, and it was sponsored by NASA. So those who know about NumPy, the first one is just array. Here we are talking only about two-dimensional. So two-dimensional array we have. NumPy.masked array, there is something called MEA. So you can mask some data. This is the second one. Yeah, this is mask data. But when you're talking in terms of climate data, we need more than that. Something called third information. It's a domain along with the meta information. So I can't just access this the dimension specifying the which dimension. I can access the data in terms of latitude, longitude. See, this is latitude, y-axis, and x-axis is longitude, and pressure level, or depth level, or in the time axis. So the user, as a user, I would like to specify to extract the data in terms of just specifying I want this time and this pressure level or this latitude longitude. Not in terms of slicing 0, 1, 2, 3 like that. So as a Python user, we would like to use in terms of something called metadata. Metadata is nothing like, so when you're talking about NumPy array, this is just NumPy, you can get all the information. So NumPy.MEA, when you're doing something mask, say for example here, I'm just masking over greater than 4. So this 5 and 6 would be masked. So also it is producing mask array, it is just for true or false. So when there is true, there is no data. When there is false, there is a data. So this is just NumPy.mask array concept. And the people from the climate data community, they introduce something called meta information. So there is something called ME2, masked variable. So when you are doing the same thing using masked variable greater than, and it is reading information like axis. So it is reading the information axis, which axis we are talking about. So UVC can access many kind of data sets, data format like NetCDF, HDF, PP. You may not have, but it's everything talking about NumPy, different file formats. So it can visualize like many things. The more important thing is the power of Python comes with scan. Scanning, like if we have individual files, thousands of files, it can just produce single XML file and it can scan all the information, meta information, and then put it into a single XML file, and then using that XML you can access all the 1,000 files, information at a single stretch. This is the power. Like here I am accessing, specifying the time, latitude, longitude from single data. So what we developed is that something called partner data. So to get today's data, today's 24-hour forecast is partner of tomorrow's truth. Like today's truth is partner of yesterday's 24-hour forecast. So to handle kind of this, we have developed a library to get the find partners and get partners data. I'll skip this right now. So we developed many utilities in terms of time utilities to get the season, in terms of summer data, winter data, or monsoon data from the largest set of data. So we have many plotting libraries. Something we plotted, to compare multiple models with multiple hours, forecasting hours, and with some statistical scores, threat score. So who is doing good? So for the correlation, if you know what is the correlation, you can compare the data sets with multiple data sets together. So this is more scientific plots to explain statistical data. So here standard deviation and the correlation says, and then this another line is called RMS, root mean square error. So we have many more scientific way to plot the way in Python. I'll skip this. So we have parallel Python, which we implemented, which we are currently using in our center. So we have something called 3D and 4D visualization in Python. So this is kind of 3D. This is called wind. You know wind, no? So the wind is moving like, this is what visualize in a 3D way. So using time it is moving the wind. You can rotate and you can point out which way you want. So I'll just go through next one. Just a 40 seconds video. So this is the earth you can visualize in Python in a 3D way. Yes, yes. So you can visualize the 3D one using Python. This is the time and pressure, the globe you can rotate. So just last 1 minute, that is not my code. That is I just took from some others that website that I shown in from the GitHub, and I did something contributed back to UVC-RAT. So this is World Meteorological Organization's weather symbols. They have some 100 weather symbols to indicate what's the weather. So IMD used to draw these symbols in hand over the chart, over the every stations. So after my MCI I created these symbols in UVC-RAT and then they accepted. I created these symbols using C programming. And this is what you can plot it to any latitude, longitude, different color and different size. That's it.
You created these symbols using C program?
Yes. Because that visualization running in background running in C. And it's integrated with the Python. And I would like to just can change the realization. You can see that the real time it is changing. So this is made by UK Met Office and then they collaborated with me. That you can see it here. So Jupyter is one of the another good platform to collaborate with others. Okay, thanks.
One question.
Yes.
Which assemble algorithm you are using to combine all the results of all the models that you are made?
Like we can use many algorithms like EOF, combined EOF, empirical orthogonal function.
Are you using something like a random forest or something?
No, we have more statistical way to compare.
With Python in education.
I'm here to introduce a device that's a low-cost, energy-efficient device. It's aimed for teaching laboratories, that is science and engineering laboratories. On one side, it's a computer, that is, it has what a regular computer would have, USB ports, HDMI, whatnot. And it also has a variety of measurement and control tools, such as voltmeters, integration with sensors, oscilloscopes, frequency counters, and so on. And all these instruments are accessible through a Python library. Okay, so what are the requirements of an undergraduate laboratory? Ideally, you need a lot of measurement and control instruments, but what is generally done is there are kits for each concept. There's one kit that includes, only the necessary instruments that go into that particular experiment. So there's no room for innovation, there's no wiggle room. With this approach, so all these instruments are combined. They can be accessed from one particular script, and with the power of Python, you can use the data you acquire and analyze it on the fly and make more fantastic experiments. Okay, so this is the workflow. On one side, you have Python that can access all these instruments. Python can do data analysis. It can visualize. Can you hear me, Ifraq? Yeah. And there are a variety of instruments that I've packed into this unit. Now, let me run a demo. Okay, so this software has been developed using PyQt, and all these widgets are PyQt based. And I've made applications specific to certain instruments, like for example, an oscilloscope. Okay, so an oscilloscope is a pretty fundamental device. It plots voltages as a function of time. So this one here is a 2 megasamples per second. That is, it acquires 2 million voltages per second. And in order to show it working, so when I'm touching it, this is noise. So it's real-time data. I shall connect it to the inbuilt waveform generator. And yeah, so I've set a sine wave generator to a particular frequency. It says it's 2166 Hertz. Now, how do you know it's that frequency? So here, this acquired data can be fit using any of Python's many modules. So I'm using SciPy and SciPy. Yeah. So it's actually fit that data, and it tells you that this is the frequency, this is the amplitude, and if I change the amplitude on the device, it will fit it in real time and tell you what the amplitude is. So this is one such tool. There are several waveform generators, there are current and voltage sources. Okay. Here, for example, I've made a physical pendulum, so a quad pendulum, and on the pendulum I've strapped an accelerometer and a gyroscope. This is one sensor IC. Now the data from this IC is acquired by Python, and these are the plots that you can see here. The data from the accelerometer gives you the angle, and the data from the gyroscope will give you the angular velocity. There's a list of the variety of tools that are in there. Okay. Now, given that you have all these tools at your disposal, you can create graphical apps for studying certain concepts. For example, this here is a full wave rectifier. So for that, you need two waveforms, sine waveforms, which are 180-degree out of phase, and you need a couple of diodes to actually act as the rectifier. Could run the experiment here. For example, half wave rectifier. So this is the input waveform, and for half wave rectification, all you need is a diode. Okay. Here's another experiment. This is capacitive reactance. For an RC circuit, there's a frequency dependent XC. And for that, the following instruments are used: a sine wave source, of course, that is the input waveform, a resistor and capacitor, that is your RC network, an oscilloscope to check the output of this RC network, and you need SciPy's curve fitting functions to extract the data and see what the phase shift is as a function of frequency. here's a plot that is commonly found whenever you're studying semiconductors. This is the saturation of a transistor. For every given base current, the collector current will saturate at some point. So you can actually do this experiment if you have a voltage source that can be swept to, and a current source that will drive the base current that you can fix. I think I've damaged one of the wires. Really used by robotics enthusiasts and such, but in order to make them accessible to people who are new to coding, I've actually implemented all the protocol in classes in Python, and you can simply run them. Yeah. So here it's auto-detected a sensor, and now it's plotting the values from that sensor. Is the graph visible? No. Okay, so it's plotting the humidity in this room right now. So if I blow on it, the value should change. Yeah, so that's real-time data from humidity sensor. Wireless bridges, okay. So some experiments, such as mechanical experiments or the experiments that are spread out over a certain region, you can't use wires. So for that, I've made a little wireless transceiver, and there's one sitting inside the box, of course. And this is a small battery-powered unit where you can plug and play sensors, the same ones that go on the device itself. And yeah, so when I plugged in the battery, it has auto-detected a sensor here at this address, and also, a node at this address, and a sensor at this address. And it says the sensor is an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a temperature sensor. So I'll remove some plots just for clarity. Yeah. So this is actually angular velocity along a certain axis. So if I rotate it, that's real data coming from this node. So this can be used for experiments such as the simple pendulum experiment, where traditionally you would do it with a stopwatch. You count 20 cycles and then you say this is the time period. But here you can actually stick this on a pendulum, let it oscillate, and you'll see a sinusoidal plot, and then you can fit it and extract more meaningful parameters. Similarly, for acceleration, this acceleration along this axis. It also does other things like controlling neopixels, servo motors. Okay, so like I mentioned, this is a full-fledged computer that runs Ubuntu. So you can have simulations and other classroom-related applications. For example, this is the Lorentz attractor that's being simulated in real time. All the code is in Python, it's pretty short. So there are various codes that can be used for physics. Yeah, so there's a Python library which you can use to get all this data. For now, I showed you all the graphical applications that are developed for people who don't know how to code. But for those who do, you can use the Python library and, for example, get average voltage. This is a command that will fetch voltage from a certain channel. So when you open the bracket, IPython will automatically give you the documentation, inline documentation. So here it says there are these many channels where you can apply voltage and it will read what that voltage is. So for example, let's say CH1, what is the voltage on CH1? Nothing connected there, so that's noise. And if you want to use an oscilloscope, the x comma y, x is the time axis, y is the voltage axis, is equal to capture 1 from CH1. I've connected the waveform generator to CH1 here. Say I want 1000 points, so it's 2 microseconds delay between each of them. And okay, when I click that, it says from PyLab import star. Instead of typing, I just put in a button there. And this has imported matplotlib's functions, plotting functions. If I say plot x comma y, plot has been generated, show. So there's your sine wave. So now I've used the terminal of the scripting language to obtain the sine wave. And similarly, there's a host of functions that are included in this. For example, set sine 1, so that's the frequency of sine wave 1. So now it will be set at 1 kilohertz. Same routine, I can do x comma y is equal to capture, plot, show. So now it's 1 kilohertz. You see, one full waveform is 1000. Yeah, I'm pretty much done. Questions? Yeah.
How much do they cost and where can we get one?
Oh, it's currently being produced as an MLU process, so it should be priced around 10,000. So this includes a single board computer and all the additional circuitry that went into the measurement tools.
Does that come with all of the sensors and the servos and all that as well?
No, sensors are different. Sensors are modular in the sense they're plug and play, so I haven't decided if I want to give some sensors by default with this. There'll be an accessory set, of course, but these are available on the market because of this Arduino sensation. These are cheap. For example, this humidity sensor cost me around 200 rupees. The accelerometer is around 300. So 3-axis accelerometer and 3-axis gyro. So they're not very expensive. They're also commonly available, eBay, even Amazon these days.
So when will they be available?
Can you describe the hardware that's in there?
The hardware, which part?
Like in the device that we get.
Okay, so like I said, there's a single board computer, which is not something I made. The single board computer, it's compatible with Raspberry Pi. This is currently running Orange Pi, which is faster, so I'm using that. But the Pi 3 has come out, so I don't know how that fares. And as far as the custom hardware goes, it's a PIC24 processor. It's a 64 megahertz processor, and there's a lot of analog electronics on the board that will allow voltage ranges up to plus minus 16 volts, programmable gains, etc.
So, schematic on the website.
There is a schematic. So, Okay, so you can look at the website. The Python code is all open source. It's on GitHub also. And so there's a few experiments. For example, the transistor CE experiment, RC integration, differentiation, LCR, steady state response. This is a detailed list of what these specs are. There's a brief user manual generated using Sphinx. It's a programmer's manual. The other is under progress, the user manual. These Python code and schematic. So they're both on GitHub.
What's the URL for the website?
What's the what?
What's the
URL.
URL for the website? How do we keep an eye on when, on your product releases and all of that?
So this is the URL.
Can you do one thing? Can you
I'll give it to Akshay. He'll put it up on the website.
can you tweet it to PyDevi?
Yeah, okay, fine.
GitHub and your website address.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, that sounds right. So,
So how does it compare to are there other comparative products like this?
not in this price range, I haven't seen. Not something that packs so much with a computer.
What's the bandwidth of the signal reflection?
So, you mean the oscilloscope?
Yeah.
So the oscilloscope is at 2 mega samples per second. So around 200 kilohertz is easily
So
displayed.
what is it limited to? Limited to the board system?
It's limited by the processor itself that is acquiring the data. So that has a 2 MSPS ADC, so that's my limit. But the logic analyzer does much better, around 15 nanoseconds resolution you get. It's a 64 megahertz processor, so from there you get the 15 nanosecond timestamp.
So when did you say it might be?
Or at least another month, 2 months. I'm done. Any more questions? We're done.
Who doesn't know what lightning talks are? Okay, quite a lot number. All right, so these are talks which are of very short duration, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Okay, you've got a good cool idea. You've been working on a project. If you would like to present within the stipulated time limit, you're more than welcome. So quite a few people signed up. If you are interested, come sign up with Akshay in the next 5 minutes if you would like to do something. Going with the list that we have, that people who signed up on the registration desk, collaborative learning using Python, and this is by Mr. Sheel Gupta, Manu Sheel Gupta. Okay. Next, Tarun Lalwani, Docker and Python. In my well, after proposing, you're supposed to be here. Design patterns using Python, Mr. Maithani. Aniket Maithani. Abhivini. Why Python is good for mathematical computing by Gaurav Dhingra. Mr. Gaurav Dhingra.
Just go outside and yell once.
Yell once, right? That should. Who's going to
Are you
react?
sure this is the room that people were told?
Yes, indeed, that was very clear. So,
Hey, are there other talks going on?
volunteers, could 2 volunteers just go and announce in the rest of the 2 halls while I crack a few? Okay, all right. So, since we are waiting, would you like to look at the blank screen or hear me talk?
Say something.
Hear me talk? Okay. So, how was the experience? How did it go today? No. Nothing. No response. It was good. चेहरे पे तो अच्छा ही बोलोगे. बाहर निकलता हूँ फिर. All right. So, what did you not like about this event?
The last minute change in the
last minute change in the talk notifications schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one major.
Template was something and we only lost some of the jobs. That is what I have faced.
Can you be a bit louder?
Yeah. So you got it very correctly that last minute change probably in the
Right.
schedule or the template was containing something and then it was changed. So we
Exactly. So there was a mismatch in this what the schedule
I
said.
mean, there will be a genuine situation, but that is what we.
Right. We have them? Okay. So lightning talks. Lightning talks. Okay, fine. We'll continue the grievance thing. Or you can consult me personally. What's your topic? You're not listed. What that? You are part of the community, as in you've been associated with PyDelhi since before this event, in any which way. Or the Python community in general? No. No. All right. Almost everyone is that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. People who came for the food are gone. Okay. So, is anyone of Manushil Gupta, Tarun Lalwani, Aniket Mathani, Gaurav Dingla, and Anubhav Balodi here? Anubhav Balodi. Competitive programming with Python? Arun Balodi. Anubhav Balodi. Right. Come down.
This is Anubhav. I'm a final year student at NIT Allahabad. I'm here to talk about competitive programming in Python. So, as you all know, competitive programming, or as the name goes, coding, it is quite, quite a big thing for people who wanna achieve something. For example, the ACM, it holds an event, ICPC. It's for the coders all over the world which are still a student at any undergraduate university. So the people are still skeptical about whether to use Python or not, because the language which are allowed in ACM ICPC are only C, C++ and Java. There is no Python. So people tend to ignore Python, but that's not the thing. Python is very powerful because of its libraries and of its simplicity, and I'm here to demystify all the things. So basically, if you want to ask anyone, if you generally ask anyone about what are the pros and cons of Python, so he or she will say that Python code is what we think it is very simplistic, and it's one of the OOPS language which anybody, even a beginner, can understand. But the cons are it is very slow as compared to other programming languages like C and C++, and the speed issues, they give a lot of TLE. For those who don't know what a TLE is, it's time limit exceeded on a coding platform. But there are a few pros which can overdo other things. For example, Python has no integer limit, so you can code anything fast, forgetting about the 32-bit or the 64-bit signed integer, and you can do a lot of shortening contests are there online, in which you can write a very big code in a few lines. Also, there are a couple of things. For example, if you want to make a list out of a set after removing the duplicate elements. So in other languages like Java, you have to use hash map and all that stuff. And in Python, it's just simple. You have to do this list set of if. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, so if you want to create a set, you will simply do set of help, and it will remove all the duplicate elements which are already present. But if you want to create another list which contains the elements of the set as a list, so you will write this. List of set of wait. Yeah, understood. So it is another list, but in other languages like Java and C++, you have to do you have to use a hash map and all that stuff, and there are pretty cool things like swapping. It is very easier. A comma B equals B comma A. So the code is very shortened, and all of you might be knowing about list slicing and comprehension. The libraries which we can use are pretty much clear, and the syntax is, it is very simpler to understand as compared to the languages. You have last but not the least, you have lambda functions, for writing inline functions. So I'm just saying that Python is a very cool language. So if you think that it is not good for coding, so you are most probably wrong. Thank you.
So, because of the time limit, we can take the question answer session we can do personally after this session. The next one we have is Mr. Manushil Gupta, collaborative learning using Python.
I think we had a pretty good set of conferences and like a pretty good set of discussions today. It was a highly energetic conference, so I'll just keep it short, the set of things that I'm planning to discuss. I got introduced into Python when I was in my second year. This is a long time back, 2007. I was working on the development of $100 laptop, and we were thinking of using Python as a core foundational language for the whole operating system stuff. So what we did was we used Fedora. On top of Fedora, we developed our own custom OS. It was called as Sugar, and it used to have a whole sequence of the different, what I should say, the whole family of sugar, that is glucose, sucrose, as the different versions of OS that we were working on. And what I wish to share with you at this juncture, like keeping it very short, are some resources and some areas where you might be interested to look into, and some interesting projects which you might be interested to really focus on. So one of, how many of us have, I'll keep it a bit interactive. So how many of us have used Logo in our primary school or secondary school? Oh, okay, cool. So there's a nice project called as Turtle Blocks. If you can search on it. Turtle Blocks is basically a modern form of constructionist learning using Python. It's more like learning by doing things. And we had integration with EXPIs and a number of projects. So one of the projects I wish to share is Turtle Blocks, which you can check out. And you can, like the whole code is on GitHub. And you can easily, like even push patches over there. And we look forward to seeing the kind of things you do with it. So we have done some interesting stuff. We were able to do all kinds of experiments in mathematics. We were able to do the whole nutritional analysis. When we were developing the laptop, so one of the questions or one of the things that we were trying out was like whether they would work in very severe humid conditions. We were deploying it somewhere in Mumbai, and the temperature is fine over there, but the humidity is very high during the summer season, somewhere over there. And what we did for that was we got some humidifiers. We got the laptops in those humidifiers, and then we tried running the Python language, doing all kinds of experiments to check out what's the humidity level, what kind of things we are doing with it. And what we found is that the overall experience was fine. I would say in 2006-07 time frame, the language was still evolving. And as someone correctly mentioned, that the Python is kind of a language which can be used like a paintbrush, which means you can either paint the whole wall using Python, or you can have very finer strokes using Python, which means you can bend it according to your needs. And second, it's interoperable with a lot of other languages. I mean, the bindings and the whole beauty of the language comes with its interoperability. So there were like a couple of findings that we found in that. The second thing I wish to share is an interesting spreadsheet project which I was myself involved in. This is way back in 2007-8 time frame. The name of the project which I would like you to check out is Social Calc. Social Calc was actually being written by the inventor of spreadsheet. He invented the spreadsheet. His name is Dan Bricklin. He was my advisor. He invented the spreadsheet when he was sitting in a class at Harvard University attending mathematics in 1979. The name of the spreadsheet was VisiCalc. And after that, Lotus 123 came in. And after Lotus 123, we had Excel. And he started, when the whole Wikipedia movement started in 2001, so he thought of a collaborative spreadsheet, and this is where the whole idea of collaboration comes in. So like there were two kinds of movements happening at the same time. One was the Wikipedia movement, the other was a kernel development movement in Linux. So there we had like Git coming out in the forefront and people collaborating using Git. So Social Calc was kind of like borrowing ideas from these movements and seeing how spreadsheet would look like in a collaborative kind of a structure. So the second project was Social Calc. It's an interesting JavaScript spreadsheet which can have a Python backend. We did a Tornado backend when FriendFeed web server was open source, which is Tornado. And we have pretty good results with it. We have also tried out a couple of interesting things with the Mozilla Foundation. So this is the second project which I would like to share. The third one is eToys. eToys was done by Alan Kay. Alan Kay is actually the father of graphical user interface programming. He brought the graphical user interface environment to the whole laptop industry. That was in Apple Lisa time frame, that's 1979. And he was involved in doing other things also in his career. He invented the object-oriented programming, which was from Xerox Spark Lab. So he's one of the guys who did a lot of eToys stuff. And the reason why I'm mentioning eToys, is because you can do all kinds of physics simulation using this kind of a project structure. So this is like the third reference which I would like to share, which I would like you to check out, and would love to see some interesting, very simple physics simulations. Like in 11th standard, we used to have, yeah, sure. I'm just closing it down. So we had like a lot of mechanics experiments in our 11th and 12th. So you can try out some of these using eToys. So I've just mentioned 3 projects which I would like you to check out: Turtle Blocks, Social Calc, and eToys. Any feedback, any questions you have, more than welcome to ask me offline. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manu. That was Manu Gupta on collaborative learning using Python. The next talk we have is from Mr. Tarun Lalwani on Docker and Python. Mr. Tarun.
And I'll be just giving you a very small demo of Docker. So how many of you have worked with virtual machines? So I assume you would have used something like VirtualBox or VMware. So see, Docker, this figure will basically give you in comparison. So right now the laptop that I'm using, we call it a bare metal. So wherein you are accessing the full machine. So when you start using VirtualBox or any virtualization technology, you basically split it into, you put a hypervisor on your host OS, which could be any, like our Mac, we put in a VirtualBox, so that is our hypervisor. And then when we start creating guest OS, so it could be, let's say, a CentOS machine, it could be an Ubuntu machine, it could be a CoreOS machine. So what happens is when we are using these guest OS, these guest OS have their own memory consumption and CPU consumption as well, and they have their own load up time. So let's assume you are booting an Ubuntu machine, it might take 2 to 3% of your CPU, it might take 200-300 MB of RAM, and it might also take 50 to 60 seconds to boot on a decent machine also. So what happens is there is a new concept called Docker. It's been popular in last few years. What that does is it uses the host OS kernel. It only works on Linux as such. It does not work on Windows or Mac OS. So what, in case you have to work on Windows or Mac, what it does is it creates a Linux VM, and inside that VM you run all the Docker images. So I'm going to give you a very small demo of how fast Docker is and how you can simply pack up your all applications in a Docker image and then give it to anyone to build it. So as of now, I have Docker set up on this machine because we have limited time. I'm not going to show how to install Docker or how to set up Docker. That's easily available on the net. So we can do a Docker pull. That means we want to get an image from the Docker registry. I want Ubuntu 14.04. So because this image is already on my machine, the command finishes within seconds, and now if I have to run this, I just say docker run it minus it, and you can see we are inside a Docker machine within a second. Now if you were doing this using a virtual machine, it would have taken at least 40 to 50 seconds. Let me exit this. I can now go into CentOS machine, again less than a second. Now I have a very small Python app which uses Redis and Flask. So it basically imports the Flask package, creates a Redis and then sets a key value pair, nothing else. So how do we pack it up? We create a Docker file. We inherit it from Python base image, which is our base image. We install the packages that we need, which is Flask and Redis in this case. We copy our app and we give what command needs to run when we start our app. Similarly, we have to give the infrastructure to it also, which we define in this, wherein we say our application is basically the current directory Docker file and it has to have a Redis server, and then we launch another Redis server using the image Redis. So you can see now if I am developing 10 applications which use Redis or MySQL, they do not have to interfere with each other. Each can own their own copy of a Redis instance or a MySQL instance. The only thing that I have to do is Docker compose up, and the application is ready. Thank you.
Docker indeed is a very cool utility. I use it very frequently, every chance I get. So the next talk we have is design patterns. The next talk we have is why Python
is
good for mathematical computing by Mr. Gaurav Dhingra. All right, let's.
for SymPy.
For SymPy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Using SymPy.
Hello everyone, I am Gaurav Dhingra, a third year undergraduate student at IIT Roorkee. So my topic today will be about why Python is a really good tool for using for doing the mathematical computing, and I will be explaining all those things using the SymPy. Okay, how in some of the in the past month I used SymPy for solving one of the bugs that was there in the SymPy. And what that bug was about is that for everybody knows about the basic mathematics of limits, the 12th class limits, and what that is about is limit of sine of x as x tends to infinity. What SymPy earlier used to do was it used to return sine of infinity, and that was one of the bugs that was there, because sine of infinity in itself was not good at that moment, because at that moment limit sine of x minus sine of x by 2 as x tends to infinity used to return 0 in itself. So that was a bug that was earlier in that SymPy, and I solved that bug in 3 weeks time, and what I want to show is that I solved that bug using just a basic mathematical heuristics. What that means is that the basic interval arithmetic that we use, that is, if an interval is from, if a number x that we know that it is between -1 and 1, if we add number 1 to that, it just makes it 0, 2. That it just increments the lower limit of the interval and the upper limit of the interval. So I made use of that basic interval arithmetic to solve that, to fix that bug in SymPy. So I want to just give an idea that getting started with the mathematical computing is not as difficult as it seems like. Doing the symbolic computation in SymPy is not that difficult at all. You can just use the basic heuristics that we know that how we do it in our own notebooks. Just like we used to do in our own notebooks, that basic integrals that we do and basic interval arithmetic, adding numbers, the basic algorithms that we follow. The same way the things are done in a symbolic computation system. So getting started with all of these things is just like getting to know, representing all those things from our notebooks onto that of a, in the form of just a language, just using the heuristics. So that I wanted to introduce all of you. So thank you. Any questions if you have regarding the SymPy or in general using symbolic computation, you can reach github.com/sympy/sympy, and you can use the github.im/sympy/sympy. Okay, thank you.
A minute yet to go. Thanks. Thank you, Gaurav. The next talk we have by Aniket Maithani, Design Patterns Using Python. Your clock's ticking.
Anybody tell me what is the difference between a design and a pattern? Quickly. It's not related to programming, nothing related to programming. I'm not a programmer.
Design is explicit, something that you do, and pattern is something that's related.
Design is basically a building block for pattern.
Yeah, you are in my last talk, aren't you? Okay, so hence a pattern is basically a repetitive decorative design. So since last couple of months I've been working with certain design pattern. It has nothing to do with programming per se, but how Python makes it easier. So I'm a guy who looks at programming in a completely different way. I want it to be more artistic. There's a term known as creative coding. I don't know how many of you have heard about it or not, but I use it pretty often. So it's basically combining the basic things, which is art and plus your passion together. I love art, I love music per se, and I love coding as well up to a certain extent. So there are certain, so I created certain kinds of pattern using Python, and how it really helped me in a real world example. So I'll have, so we basically have there are some examples of pattern, which are like pattern can be geometric, asymmetric, symmetric, etc. But I'll focus on the fractal patterns. Anybody know what a fractal pattern is? Yeah. So basically, fractal patterns are recursive patterns. So what generally happens is, if you want to create some very complex kind of a pattern, these are formed in nature. If I take an example of a leaf, so what you of a flower, so so you draw a circle, then from the circle you draw another one of the part, and then another, and so on and so forth. So basically, what we have a base rule over here, and so the base rule is key. Once the circle is complete, we'll draw another circle, stuff like that. So that really helped me in one of the project I did on a freelance basis for. So yeah, so these are some of the examples. I won't go into the detail. This is a kind of like an old presentation. So the kind of library I used for these are Pandas, SciPy, Matplotlib, but those were not extensively Matplotlib. Image library, which is now been PIL. So basically, we believe in 3 R's thing. So which is recursion, rules, and results. So you have a set of rules. Okay, there's a line. At the end of the line, I'll draw a circle. Then I'll draw another line. Then another circle, and you'll have a pattern over it. Sorry, I don't have an example right now on my laptop, but I'll be happy if you could catch me offline to, for the following, and I'll show you the example which are there on my laptop. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Lightning Talk session. Okay, and next item in line is the closing ceremony. So we're going to have some guests, and that's what we're going to happen. We've got 5 minutes before.
Wait, we can have a photograph.
We can have like it's. So Pi Delhi Conf is officially
over.
मानने वाली बात.
राग लगा कि तो गाओ. राग तो लगा.
गाना होता तो कोड थोड़े लिखते. गाना आता. Come on, कहाँ तुम लोग?
वीडियो ऑन
Come on.
वीडियो ऑन रख दो.
फोटो कॉल दे रहे हैं, बात तो ये.
ओ यहाँ. कैमरा दे क्या? कैमरा दे क्या?
अबे कैमरा दे क्या होने?
अब फोटो वाला भी कोई जाओ. अब फोटो भी जाओ कोई.
यार कोई
कैमरा ले जा.
वेब
Give us the opportunity to have this conference here, whose efforts made it possible. So dignitaries from both JNU and Pi Delhi are coming in. Please wait for 5 minutes. उसके बाद प्रारंभ करते हैं. Closing ceremony with Pi Delhi, Gora, Sirtaj. कोई बात नहीं, 5 मिनट के लिए और dignitary बन जाओ. Just 5 more minutes of. So Gora, Sirtaj, is Satya in the house? Kushag, can you please call Satya come?
Now I request Professor D.K. Lobel, the chairperson of this workshop, please come over the stage. I request Professor C.P. Katti, the invited guest for this workshop, please come over the stage. I request Dr. Sushil Kumar, the coordinator of this workshop, please come over the stage. I request Dr. Karan Singh, the coordinator of this workshop, please come over the stage.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So all the Pi Delhi volunteers, if you can come up on stage, please.
The Pi Delhi volunteers.
So can I have a big applause to all the volunteers, please? Next, it wouldn't be possible without the audience either. So a big round of applause for you guys for making this possible. And next, that's it. Thank you for coming and thanking me.
I request Vishnu Shankar to come over the stage.
Wait.
Vipin Rathi. Please come over the stage. Gaurav Kumar Nayak. Mr. Ajay Kumar. Sunil Kumar Meena, please come over the stage. Mr. Dilip Yadav, please come over the stage. Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Sushil Kumar to give vote of thanks. Please come over the stage.
C.P. Katti, Professor D.K. Lovyal, Dr. Karan Singh, our most valued invited guest, teacher and student. It is a pleasure and a great joy for me to extend a vote of thanks to all those who have contributed in one way or the other to make this workshop Pi Delhi 2016 a success. A big thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor and Dean of the school for granting the permission for organizing this workshop. A very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers for gracing your important work and sharing with us findings and opinion today. I also wish to express my gratitude to Professor D.K. Lovyal and Professor Katti for providing encouragement. I also wish to thanks to the students who have attended this workshop and express your thought. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru University for the perfect logistic support. Mr. Chairman, guests and students, once again, I want to state that we are almost grateful to all speakers on this stage. We thank you for being with us this evening. It has been a great pleasure. Now I declare this workshop closed. Thank you very much.